My family left for vacation while I fought for my life in ICU. When they returned, the last thing I remember before hitting the kitchen floor was the sound of my wife Linda humming in the laundry room. It was that old Eagles song she always hummed when she was happy. Take it easy. The irony wasn't lost on me later. I'd been feeling off all week. A tightness in my chest that I kept brushing off as stress from the hardware store. At 62, I'd been running Morrison's Hardware for 35 years. And every small business owner knows that familiar ache between your shoulder blades. But this was different. This felt like someone was slowly tightening a vice around my heart. "Richard, dinner's ready!" Linda called from somewhere that sounded miles away, though she was just down the hall. I tried to answer, but my voice came out as a wheeze. The room tilted sideways, and suddenly the white kitchen tiles were rushing up to meet my face. The impact sent a shock through my skull, but it was nothing compared to the elephant that had apparently decided to sit on my chest. Everything went black. When I came to, I was staring at fluorescent lights that seemed to buzz with the intensity of 1,000 angry wasps. The smell hit me next, that sterile, antiseptic smell that can only mean one thing: hospital. The steady beep of monitors surrounded me like some kind of electronic symphony. And when I tried to move, I discovered I was connected to more wires than a telephone pole. "Mr. Morrison? Can you hear me?" A young nurse with kind eyes leaned over me, checking the 4 in my arm. "You're in the cardiac ICU at Methodist Hospital. You've had a major heart attack." Heart attack. The words hit me like a second collapse. I'd always prided myself on being healthy. Sure, I carried a few extra pounds around the middle, but I could still haul 50-pound bags of concrete mix without breaking a sweat. How long have I been here?" My voice sounded like sandpaper on concrete. "About 18 hours. You were touch and go for a while there, Mr. Morrison." The doctors performed emergency surgery to clear the blockage. "You're lucky to be alive." "Lucky? Right." I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun like a carnival ride. "Where's my family? My wife? My kids?" The nurse's expression shifted slightly, a shadow crossing her face. "Let me check with the front desk about your visitors." She disappeared, leaving me alone with the constant chorus of beeping machines. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in each square, trying to make sense of what had happened. Linda should be here. Our kids, Mike, Sarah, and Jenny, they should all be here. Hell, half the town should know by now. That's how it worked in places like Millbrook, Ohio. News traveled faster than gossip at a church potluck. The nurse returned with a clipboard and an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mr. Morrison, I need to ask, do you have any emergency contacts besides your immediate family?" "Why? What do you mean?" She sat down in the chair next to my bed, which somehow made everything worse. "When hospital staff sit down to talk to you, it's never good news. Sir, we've been trying to reach your family since you were admitted. Your wife left a message with the front desk yesterday morning," she said. The nurse glanced at her clipboard, clearly uncomfortable. "She said they had a family vacation planned to Florida that couldn't be cancelled, and that they'd be back in a week." The words hit me harder than the heart attack itself. I must have misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your wife mentioned it was already paid for and non-refundable. She left a number where she could be reached for emergencies, but said the doctors assured her you were stable." I stared at this woman, this stranger, trying to process what she just told me. My family, the people I'd spent 38 years building a life with, the kids I'd worked 16-hour days to put through college, the wife I'd given everything to, had gone on vacation while I lay dying in a hospital bed. "They went to Disney World," I said, more to myself than to the nurse. It wasn't a question. I knew exactly which trip she meant. We planned it months ago, a big family reunion with all the kids and grandkids. The first real vacation we'd taken together in years. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Morrison. Is there anyone else we can call? A brother, sister, close friend?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. The room suddenly felt colder, despite the warm blanket tucked around me. The beeping of the monitors seemed louder, more insistent, as if they were trying to fill the silence left by the people who should have been there. For 35 years, I'd been the foundation of our family. I'd built the business from nothing, working 7 days a week so Linda could stay home with the kids. I'd never missed a mortgage payment, never missed a birthday party or school play. When Mike needed money for his restaurant startup, I'd given it to him without question. When Sarah went through her expensive divorce, I'd paid her legal bills. When Jenny wanted to go to that fancy art school in California, I'd figured out how to make it happen. And now, when I needed them most, when I'd literally almost died, they'd chosen Mickey Mouse over me. The nurse squeezed my hand gently. The important thing is that you're going to recover, Mr. Morrison. The surgery was successful, and with proper care, you should be able to go home in about a week. Home. To what? An empty house and the knowledge that when push came to shove, my family's vacation plans were more important than my life. As she left me alone again, I closed my eyes and listened to the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, the only sound in the room that proved I was still alive. Outside my window, I could hear the distant sound of traffic, people going about their normal lives while mine had just been turned upside down. I thought about Linda humming, "Take it easy," in our kitchen, just before everything changed. How fitting that the last normal moment of my old life had been soundtracked by a song about letting things slide. But as I lay there in that sterile room, surrounded by machines instead of family, I realized something was hardening inside my chest alongside my healing heart. Maybe it was time to stop taking things so easy. The worst part wasn't the pain in my chest or the tubes snaking out of my arms like some medical octopus. The worst part was 3 o'clock. Every day at 3 o'clock, visiting hours began in the cardiac ICU, and every day at 3 o'clock, I got a front row seat to just how alone I really was. "Richard, you've got this," I'd whisper to myself as the clock hands crept toward the dreaded hour. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. The transformation was like watching a morgue come to life. Mrs. Patterson in bed 3 had her entire extended family cramming around her like she was holding court: sons, daughters, grandkids, even what looked like a great-grandchild learning to walk between the chair legs. The man in bed 5, who'd had bypass surgery the same day as me, had a steady rotation of visitors that included his poker buddies, his bowling league, and neighbors who brought homemade soup in mason jars. And then there was me, in bed 7, with 2 empty chairs that might as well have had "abandoned" signs taped to them. The nurses tried to be kind about it. Sharon, the day shift nurse who'd become my unofficial therapist, would always find extra reasons to check on me during visiting hours. Taking my blood pressure twice, adjusting my blankets, asking about my pain levels even though she'd asked an hour before. I appreciated it, but we both knew what she was doing. "Your family must be having a wonderful time in Florida," she'd say, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're trying to convince themselves of something they don't believe. "The weather's been beautiful there this week." I'd just nod and stare at the ceiling, counting those damn holes again. 964 holes per tile, in case anyone was wondering. It was during one of these visiting hours, as I listened to Mrs. Patterson's grandson reading her a story about a brave little rabbit, that the memories started flooding back like water through a burst dam. I remembered Mike's 8th birthday party. Linda had wanted to hire a clown, but we couldn't afford it. So I'd spent 3 nights after work building him a tree house in our backyard oak tree. Nothing fancy, just some plywood and 2x4s, but you'd have thought I'd built him a castle. He'd spent the entire summer up there with his friends, planning adventures and eating peanut butter sandwiches 20 feet off the ground. When had Mike stopped looking at me like I could build castles? I thought about Sarah's high school graduation. She'd been accepted to 3 colleges, but the one she really wanted was also the most expensive. I'd worked double shifts at the store for 6 months, taking on weekend construction jobs to make up the difference. My hands were so torn up from handling lumber and concrete that Linda had to bandage them every night. But Sarah got her degree in engineering, and I was so proud I bought every newspaper in town when they printed her graduation announcement. When had Sarah stopped needing me to fix things? And Jenny, my baby girl. She'd been so shy as a kid that she'd hide behind my legs whenever strangers came into the store. But she could draw anything. Even as a 5-year-old, she'd sketched perfect pictures of birds and flowers that looked like they might fly right off the paper. When she told us she wanted to study art in California, Linda had laughed and said it wasn't practical. But I'd seen something in Jenny's eyes, that same hunger I'd had when I dreamed of building something that mattered. The art school cost more than my first house, but somehow we'd made it work. I'd refinanced the store, taken out a second mortgage, eaten beans and rice for months. Jenny had cried when she found out how much it cost, said she didn't want me to sacrifice for her dreams. "That's what dads do, sweetheart," I told her. "We build bridges to your future." When had Jenny stopped believing I could build bridges? Morrison's Hardware had been more than just a business, it had been our family's lifeline. Every nail, every wrench, every bag of fertilizer sold had gone towards something important. Mike's Little League uniforms. Sarah's chemistry set. Jenny's art supplies. Linda's book club membership. Date nights at Romano's Italian restaurant once a month, where we'd split a pizza and pretend we were still the young couple who'd gotten married in Linda's parents' backyard. I'd never missed a mortgage payment in 38 years. Not once. Even during the recession when the big box stores moved in and half our customers disappeared, I'd found a way. Sold my dad's coin collection, worked nights at the loading dock over at Patterson's Mill, did whatever it took to keep our world stable. For what? So they could sip cocktails by the pool while I fought for my life? Mrs. Patterson's family was laughing about something now, probably one of those embarrassing stories families tell when they're all together. The kind of stories that only make sense if you've lived through them together, if you've built a lifetime of shared moments that turn into treasured memories. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine Linda here, holding my hand and telling me about the dolphins they'd seen from their hotel balcony. I tried to picture my kids taking turns keeping me company, arguing about who got to stay the longest. But all I could see were empty chairs and a future that suddenly looked a lot different than the one I'd been building for 4 decades. The clock above my bed ticked toward 4:30. Visiting hours would end soon, and the ICU would return to its familiar quiet. Just me and the machines, keeping each other company. It was Sharon who accidentally broke my world wide open. I'd been in the ICU for 5 days when she came rushing into my room on Thursday morning, looking flustered in a way I'd never seen before. Sharon was usually the calm one, the nurse who could handle anything from a cardiac emergency to a family meltdown without breaking a sweat. But today, something had rattled her. "Mr. Morrison, I need to apologize," she said, fidgeting with the chart in her hands. "I think I may have shared some information I shouldn't have." I was still groggy from the pain medication, trying to focus on her words through the fog. "What kind of information?" She glanced toward the door, then back at me, clearly wrestling with something. "Yesterday afternoon, I was at the nurse's station when a young man came asking about you. Said he was your son Mike? He was on his cell phone, talking to someone about... well, about your business." My heart monitor started beeping faster. Even in my medicated haze, I could sense something bad was coming. "Sharon, what did you hear?" "He was talking to someone about getting power of attorney paperwork rushed through. Something about a potential buyer for Morrison's Hardware who wanted to move quickly." She sat down heavily in the chair beside my bed. "I thought it was strange, him talking business while you're here fighting for your life. But then I remembered you mentioning your family was on vacation, and I just assumed." The words hit me like ice water. "What exactly did he say?" "He kept saying things like while the old man's out of commission and strike while the iron's hot. He mentioned something about the property being worth more than the business itself, and how some developer had been sniffing around for months." Sharon's voice got quieter. "Mr. Morrison, I think I made a mistake. When he asked about your condition, I told him you were stable but would probably be here for another week or 2 inch." The room started spinning again, but this time it wasn't from the medication. "You told him I'd be here for 2 weeks? He seemed so concerned about you. I thought he was worried about your recovery time." Sharon's eyes were filling with tears. But after he hung up, I heard him tell someone else that 2 weeks would give them plenty of time to get everything sorted before the old bastard can cause problems. The heart monitor was going crazy now, beeping so fast it sounded like a machine gun. A part of me wanted to believe I was hallucinating, that the drugs were making me paranoid. But deep down, in that place where you keep the truths you don't want to face, I knew every word was real. "There's more," Sharon continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't tell you this, but..." He asked if you'd been alert enough to sign any documents. When I said no, he seemed relieved. Morrison's Hardware. The business I'd built from nothing, starting with $1,000 loan and a dream bigger than our tiny storefront. 35 years of 7-day weeks, of choosing work over fishing trips, of putting every penny back into inventory and improvements. The place where I taught Mike how to use a cash register, where Sarah had done her homework at the counter after school, where Jenny had drawn pictures on the backs of receipt papers. They were planning to sell it. While I was lying here with my chest cracked open and my heart held together by surgical thread, my own son was orchestrating the sale of my life's work. "The developer he mentioned," I managed to croak out. "Did he say a name?" Sharon nodded reluctantly. "Something like Atlantic Properties. He kept talking about how they wanted to put in a strip mall, how the corner location was perfect for it." Atlantic Properties. I knew exactly who that was, some out-of-state company that had been buying up Main Street properties for the past 2 years, tearing down local businesses and replacing them with chain stores and fast food restaurants. They'd approached me 3 times in the past year, each offer higher than the last. Each time, I told them Morrison's Hardware wasn't for sale at any price. But apparently my family had a different opinion about that. The betrayal cut deeper than any surgical incision. It wasn't just about the money or even the business itself. It was about what Morrison's Hardware represented: generations of trust between neighbors, a place where people came not just to buy screws and paint, but to get advice on fixing their lives one project at a time. Old Joe Martinez still brought me pictures of his grandson's Little League games. Mrs. Chen always asked me to help her pick out the right flowers for her garden. Bobby Thompson, the kid who'd been mowing lawns since he was 12, came to me every spring for equipment advice. These people weren't just customers, they were my community. And Mike wanted to pave over all of it for a quick payday. "Mr. Morrison, are you okay? Should I call the doctor?" Sharon was looking at the heart monitor with growing concern. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe slowly, watching the numbers on the monitor gradually decrease. When I opened them again, something had changed. The fog of medication and grief was lifting, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Pure, cold, calculating anger. "Sharon," I said, my voice steadier than it had been since I'd arrived. "I need you to do me a favor. Could you bring me a phone book and help me make a call?" "Of course, but who do you need to call?" I looked at those empty chairs beside my bed, chairs that would apparently stay empty while my family carved up my legacy like a Thanksgiving turkey. "My lawyer. It seems I have some business to take care of." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, but rage has a way of steadying a man when nothing else will. Sharon had found me the phone book and wheeled over one of those hospital phone carts, the kind with arms that swing over your bed. Every movement sent lightning bolts through my chest, reminding me that just 6 days ago, surgeons had cracked me open like a lobster. But some things are worth the pain. The first number I dialed was Tom Bradley's law office. Tom had been handling my business paperwork for 20 years, ever since he'd graduated law school and hung his shingle 2 blocks down from Morrison's Hardware. I'd watched him grow from a nervous kid in an oversized suit to one of the most respected attorneys in 3 counties. "Bradley Law Office, this is Tom speaking." "Tom, it's Richard Morrison." There was a pause, followed by genuine surprise in his voice. "Richard? Jesus, I heard about your heart attack. How are you holding up? Linda said you were touch and go for a while there." "Linda said that, did she?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "When exactly did you talk to Linda?" "She called Tuesday morning, asked me some questions about your business arrangements. Said she needed to understand the paperwork in case, His voice trailed off as he realized what he'd almost said. In case I died. Richard, I'm sure she was just being practical. Tom, I need you to listen very carefully. Did Linda or any of my kids ask you about power of attorney? About what would happen to Morrison's hardware if I was incapacitated? Another pause, longer this time. Tom was a good lawyer, which meant he was careful about what he said and how he said it. Richard, maybe we should discuss this when you're feeling better. I'm feeling fine enough to know when I'm being screwed over by my own family. My voice was getting stronger, fueled by a fury that seemed to be burning away the medication fog. Did they or didn't they? Mike called yesterday. He wanted to know about emergency powers, about how quickly certain transitions could be made if necessary. If necessary. Like my death was just another business contingency to plan for. Tom, I need you to get down here right now. Bring whatever paperwork you need to make damn sure that nobody, and I mean nobody, can touch Morrison's hardware without my signature. Can you do that? Of course, but Richard, how long will it take you? I can be there in an hour. But are you sure you're up for this? Maybe we should wait until you're out of intensive care. I'll be up for it. I hung up before he could argue further. The second call was harder to make, but even more important. I dialed a number I knew by heart, even though I hadn't used it in months. Peterson Construction, this is Earl. Earl Peterson and I went back 40 years, to when we were both young men trying to make our mark in Millbrook. He'd started with one pickup truck and a toolbox. I'd started with $1,000 loan and a dream. We'd helped each other through lean times, celebrated each other's successes, and built something rare in the business world, genuine friendship. Earl, it's Richard. Holy hell, Richard! I was just about to drive over to the hospital. How you feeling, brother? Brother. When had my actual family stopped feeling like family, while friends like Earl still called me brother? I've been better. Earl, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Have any of my kids approached you about Morrison's hardware? The silence stretched so long I wondered if the line had gone dead. Earl? Damn it, Richard. I was hoping you wouldn't find out about this until you were back on your feet. My chest tightened, and not from the surgery. What did they want? Mike came by the office Wednesday. Said you were probably going to want to retire after this health scare, and that the family was exploring options. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in the property for a new construction office. And? I told him to go to hell. Earl's voice was hard as concrete. I said if you wanted to sell, you'd call me yourself. But Richard. He had papers with him. Legal-looking documents. Said something about having to move fast because there was another buyer interested. Atlantic Properties. They were moving even faster than I'd thought. Earl, I need you to do me a favor. Can you get over to the store and keep an eye on things? Maybe park your truck out front, make it obvious you're watching? Already planned on it. Been driving by twice a day since Tuesday. Figure anybody wants to mess with Morrison's hardware, they'll have to go through me first. For the first time in 6 days, I felt something that might have been a smile trying to form on my face. I don't deserve friends like you, Earl. Sure you do. You just married into the wrong family. After I hung up, I lay back against the pillows and closed my eyes. My chest felt like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it, but my mind was clearer than it had been since before the heart attack. The medication was wearing off, and with it, the last of my illusions about the people I'd spent my life caring for. But something else was happening too. Something I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. I felt dangerous. For 38 years, I'd been Richard Morrison, reliable husband and father. Richard Morrison, who worked himself to the bones so everyone else could be comfortable. Richard Morrison, who never said no when his family needed something, never questioned where the money went or whether it was appreciated. That Richard Morrison had almost died 6 days ago. The man lying in this hospital bed was someone different. Someone who'd been stripped down to his core and discovered that his core was made of something harder than his family had counted on. Tom would be here soon with the paperwork. Earl was watching my store. And somewhere in Florida, My family was probably toasting another beautiful sunset, confident that the old man was out of commission and their payday was secure. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I wasn't done yet. Not even close. They walked into my room like they were strolling into a resort lobby. Linda was first, practically glowing with that post-vacation radiance that comes from 7 days of sunshine and 0 responsibilities. She'd gotten her hair done, those perfect blonde highlights that cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Behind her came Mike, Sarah, and Jenny, all sporting Florida tans and carrying shopping bags from what looked like every gift shop on the Gulf Coast. "Daddy!" Jenny rushed toward my bed, arms full of wrapped presents. "We brought you so many things! Key lime cookies and—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Tom Bradley sitting in the chair beside my bed, a stack of legal documents spread across the rolling table between us. "Oh," Linda said, her smile faltering slightly. "Tom, what a surprise! We didn't expect to see you here." Tom glanced at me, waiting for my lead. I'd been preparing for this moment all morning, rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd handle the confrontation. But now that they were here, looking so relaxed and happy, I found myself fascinated by the performance. "How was Disney World?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm. "Oh, it was wonderful!" Linda perked up, apparently deciding to pretend everything was normal. "The weather was perfect, and the grandkids had such a good time." Jenny got some amazing photos of the sunset from our hotel balcony. The sunsets were incredible. Jenny added, still clutching her shopping bags. "I wish you could have seen them, Dad." I nodded thoughtfully. "I'll bet they were. Much better than ICU sunrises, I imagine." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Mike was staring at the legal documents on my table, his vacation glow already starting to fade. Sarah was looking between Tom and me with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle she didn't like the answer to. "Well," Linda said with forced brightness, "the important thing is that you're looking so much better. When we left, the doctor said you'd probably be sleeping most of the week." "Funny thing about almost dying," I said, still in that same conversational tone. "It has a way of waking a man up." Tom cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should give you folks some privacy." "No, stay." I didn't take my eyes off my family. "I think they'd be interested in what we've been working on." Mike stepped forward, trying to summon his old confident smile. "Dad, you shouldn't be worrying about business right now. You need to focus on getting better." "Business," I repeated the word like I was tasting it. "Yes, let's talk about business. Tom, would you mind explaining to my family what we've accomplished this morning?" Tom shifted uncomfortably but opened the top folder. "We've executed several documents that ensure Mr. Morrison maintains complete control over Morrison's hardware and all related properties. No decisions regarding the business can be made without his explicit written consent." The color drained from Mike's face so fast I thought he might need his own cardiac unit. "We've also," Tom continued, "revoked any informal discussions about potential sales or transfers that may have taken place during Mr. Morrison's incapacitation." "What sales?" Linda asked, but her voice had gone up half an octave. "Nobody said anything about selling anything." I reached into the folder and pulled out a document Tom had prepared based on my phone calls. "Atlantic Properties. Ring a bell, Mike?" The shopping bags slipped from Jenny's hands, spilling Florida souvenirs across the hospital floor. Sarah sank into the empty chair like someone had cut her strings. "Dad, I can explain," Mike started. "Can you?" I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the pull of stitches across my chest. "Please, explain to me how my son, while I was fighting for my life in intensive care, was negotiating the sale of the business I spent 35 years building. You're taking this all wrong," Mike said, but his voice was shaking now. "We were just exploring options in case the worst happened." "The worst," I let the words hang in the air. "You mean in case I died? We were being responsible." Sarah finally found her voice. "Someone had to think about the practical things while you were." "While I was what, Sarah? Dying? Is that so inconvenient for you that you couldn't wait for the funeral to start dividing up my life's work?" Linda moved to the foot of my bed, her hands gripping the rail. "Richard, you're being unfair. We were scared, we didn't know what to do." "You were scared?" I looked at each of them in turn. "So scared that you went to Disney World." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the constant beeping of the heart monitor seemed muted, as if the machines themselves were holding their breath. "We couldn't just sit around the hospital doing nothing," Jenny said quietly, tears starting to form in her eyes. "The trip was already paid for, and the doctors said you were stable. Stable enough to rob, apparently. That's not fair." Mike's composure finally cracked. "Everything we've done, everything we have, came from that store. We have a right to. You have a right to nothing." My voice cut through his protest like a blade. "That store exists because I built it. Every nail, every board, every satisfied customer. You have contributed exactly zero to Morrison's hardware, except for the money I've given you over the years." I turned to Tom. "Speaking of which, I believe we have one more document to review?" Tom nodded and pulled out a thick folder. "The revised will and estate plan." Linda's knees actually buckled. Sarah started crying. Mike looked like he was about to be sick. "Don't worry," I said, watching their faces. "You'll all still inherit something. My medical bills, for instance. I'm sure those will be substantial." The shopping bags full of Florida's souvenirs lay scattered across the floor like broken promises. 7 days of sunshine and Mickey Mouse ears, purchased with the assumption that the old man would either be dead or too weak to fight back by the time they returned. They'd bet wrong. "Now," I said, settling back against my pillows, "why don't you tell me more about those beautiful sunsets you enjoyed while I was learning exactly who my family really is?" The silence stretched on, heavy with the weight of 38 years of illusions finally crashing down. 3 months later, I was standing behind the counter of Morrison's Hardware at 6:30 in the morning, watching Earl Peterson's crew unload lumber for the Hendersons' new deck project. The early morning light streaming through the front windows felt different somehow, cleaner, like it was illuminating a world I was seeing clearly for the first time in decades. My recovery had been slower than the doctors predicted but faster than my family hoped. Linda had visited twice more after that confrontation in the ICU, both times bringing lawyers of her own, both times leaving empty-handed. Mike had tried calling once, something about working things out like adults. I'd hung up after he mentioned the phrase fair settlement. Sarah and Jenny had written letters. Long, emotional appeals about family and forgiveness, about how they'd made mistakes but still loved me. I'd read them carefully, then filed them away with the divorce papers Linda had served me with 6 weeks ago. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Chin shuffled in carrying a small potted plant. She'd been bringing me something green every week since I'd reopened the store, a jade plant, some succulents, a small bamboo arrangement. Today it looked like herbs. "Morning, Mr. Morrison. How are you feeling?" "Better every day, Mrs. Chin." "What have you brought me this time?" She set the pot on the counter with a shy smile. "Basil. For strength and healing. My grandmother always said basil helps a man find his true path." I touched one of the fragrant leaves. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She survived the war by knowing who to trust." Mrs. Chen's eyes, usually bright with humor, turned serious. "Sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones who hurt us most. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, we live long enough to choose a different family." She patted my hand and headed toward the garden section, leaving me with her words and the scent of fresh basil. Earl walked in as Mrs. Chin was picking out fertilizer, his boots heavy on the wooden floors that had been my father's pride when he'd helped me install them 30 years ago. "Morning, Richard. Coffee's on at the diner if you want to join the usual suspects." The usual suspects were a group of local business owners who met every morning at Romano's to solve the world's problems over coffee and eggs. I'd stopped joining them years ago, always too busy, always something more important to do at home. Now home was a small apartment above Peterson Construction's office, and the most important thing I had to do was live. "Save me a seat. I'll be there in 10 minutes. As Earl headed back out, I looked around the store that had been my prison and was now my sanctuary. The inventory was leaner than it used to be, I'd stopped carrying items that barely broke even, stopped trying to compete with the big box stores on everything. Instead, I focused on what Morrison's Hardware had always done best: knowing our customers, solving their problems, being the place people came when they needed more than just merchandise. Bobby Thompson's lawn service had grown into a full landscaping business, and he still bought all his tools from me. The Martinez family had opened a second restaurant, and Joe still brought me pictures of his grandson's baseball games. Mrs. Patterson had recovered from her heart surgery, and now volunteered to help customers pick out paint colors on Saturday mornings. These people hadn't abandoned me when I needed them. They'd sent cards to the hospital, brought casseroles to my apartment, asked about my health every time they came in. They were my community, my real family, the one I'd been too busy building a business to fully appreciate before. The register chimed as I rang up Mrs. Chen's fertilizer. She'd added a small American flag for her garden, the kind people planted near their tomatoes to show they were proud of what they'd grown. "Thank you for the basil," I told her. "Thank you for staying," she replied simply. Staying. Yes, that's what I'd done. I'd stayed when it would have been easier to give up, stayed when my own family had written me off, stayed to rebuild not just my health but my understanding of what really mattered. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Jenny or Sarah. Instead, it was Earl. "Diner crew wants to know if you're bringing any of Mrs. Chen's herbs. Apparently your basil made yesterday's eggs unforgettable." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Outside, Millbrook was waking up. Soon the store would fill with the familiar sounds of people fixing their worlds one project at a time. And I'd be here to help them, not because I had to be, not because someone else's dreams depended on it, but because this was where I belong. The heart attack had stripped away everything I thought I knew about my life. But in that stripping away, it had revealed something I'd forgotten: the difference between existing for others and living for yourself. I flipped the sign from "closed" to "open" and headed toward the door, Mrs. Chen's basil plant in one hand and my keys in the other. They'd left me to die, but when I came back, I'd chosen to live without them. And for the first time in 38 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be.